Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Please be sure to download the app, share it with your friends. You'll have access to all of our station's content. And if you like what Joe and I do, really, we're getting some trouble from YouTube and Facebook. So if you're going to help us out on social media, we're not relying so much on those others anymore. It's X and it's Rumble. X Rumble. Find Joe and Joe. Help us out. Like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Joe and I, we love talking about articles. We always talk to authors about their books and everything else. We're welcoming back to the program Karen Hall because she has an article in Catholic Exchange, Radical Catholicism. I wonder what that is. We're gonna define our terms here, and we're gonna hash that out. It sounds like a broad topic, but we're gonna pinpoint exactly what Karen is writing about in this article. For those of you who don't remember the last conversation, Karen is an American television writer, best known for her work on such television series as MASH, Hill Street Blues, Moonlighting, Judging Amy, and The Good Wife. She's been nominated for 7 Emmy Awards, 6 Writers Guild Awards. She's won the WGA Award and the Woman in Film Luminous Award, and many others. Her novel, Dark Debts, was a Book of the Month Club main selection. She is a parishioner at Incarnation Catholic Church, which is the Anglican Ordinaria in Orlando, Florida, and is married to her high school sweetheart, Chris Walker. They have 4 children. Karen Hall, welcome to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Our sister, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. The first time, like we told you, the first time was such a pleasure talking to you, and we had such a great conversation. I encourage anyone out there that that interview is posted all over social media on our social media pages. And it's also, you could download it on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network app. That was also a great conversation. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe Resinello, and we'll talk about radical Catholicism.
Karen, we always begin with a prayer in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, never was it known that anyone who sought your help or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, a virgin of virgins, our mother. To you we come, for you we stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your clemency hear and answer us. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, I love the title of this article, Karen, Radical Catholicism, because I'm going to be truthful with you. It's the only Catholicism I'm interested in because Jesus was radical. I mean, people I think, made Jesus like this, I call him the hippie Jesus. I don't like the hippie Jesus.
But
Jesus wasn't a hippie. Jesus was the most controversial human being that has ever walked the earth. There has never been a more prolific revolutionary to the likes of Jesus Christ since, and never will be, ever. And he basically created a church, which we all belong to. That means that we are not supposed to be like everybody else. That doesn't mean we're going to go out into the streets and they're going to hang us from a tree like they did to him. Some maybe, probably Joe Pasillo, but that's a conversation for another day. But ultimately, we're not supposed to be. We're supposed to be in the world and not of the world. And that means, to a degree, we too are radical. You wrote an article, Radical Catholicism. What is it?
It's really easy. It's what was, when I was in high school, Catholicism. I realized that I had become part of the fringe element without really moving an inch. Because, the church moved, I didn't. And all I ever wanted to be was what I used to call a meat and taters Catholic. I just want to be a normal human. I've always wanted to be mainstream, not fringe. And as I've watched the church change, especially over the last decade, I realized that in order to be what I used to be, I now have become part of the fringe element. Which is something I never would have signed up for. And when we started going to the Anglican Ordinariate, we had been in a Novus Ordo parish for a long time, and it just got worse and worse. And, one night my husband and I just looked at each other and said, we can't do this anymore. And I believe that was the night that the priest made us sing, "When you're happy and you know it, clap your hands," with all the verses. Um, so when it was time to stand up, we left. And so we went to the Anglican Ordinariate, and the first mass we went there, my husband said, "This is what mass was when I was an altar boy." And I said, "That's what I want, you know. I'm a convert, so part of it is that I love the 2,000-year-old through line. And I didn't want to be, I want to be that. I don't want to be separate from that." So I wrote the article. I was thinking about the fact that, you know, I mean, I really can only hang out, you know, and have as friends other traditional Catholics now, because the chasm is so wide. And, you know, when somebody tells me that they're Catholic, if I'm at a Novus Ordo church, I have no idea what they mean. You know, are they a Catholic for Democrats, a Catholic for abortion, a Catholic for, you know, blessing gay marriages? So, it's just, it's become such a huge divide. And I don't think that my mass at a Novus Ordo church was not preparing me for persecution, or, you know, whatever is going to come down the pike that Jesus has told us is going to come down the pike. So when I wrote the article, I was thinking about the fact that I'm now a radical Catholic, whether I want to be or not. And I was thinking of, I had listed some ways in the article that I thought people could embrace radical Catholicism, because I said, you know, if we're going to be the fringe element anyway, let's embrace it. Um, you know, things that it really changed my life, going to the Anglican Ordinary at Mass. And we've been going for 2 years now. Um, and so I wrote about the things that had changed my life, and the first one was reverence, because I think the number one thing that made us leave the Novus Ordo was that we really couldn't stand the lack of reverence anymore, um, and it just feels horrible. And during Lent, I decided I wanted to go to Mass every day, but the Anglican Ordinariate is way across town, and there's a Novus Ordo 9 minutes from me, so I decided to go there every day, and I just barely survived it. um, and I wanted, you know, I'd love the idea of going to daily Mass every day, but I can't go to that church. It makes fire come out of my ears. So
Yeah,
that's it.
it really is amazing. Karen Hall is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. She's got her recent article. Please go and read it at the Catholic Exchange. We're here talking about it, and the title of the article is "Radical Catholicism." I'm with you. I've I've gotten to the point, Karen, where you know, because again, I have been there and done that. I wasn't always firmly in the church. I've said that before on the show. I had to come back to the church and realize you know, what I was doing wrong with my life. So I've been there. I was the guy wearing flip-flops and
Mhm.
leaving after Holy Communion because I wanted to get to the Jet game. Like I don't judge anybody in that regard. Okay, where what I do judge is I do judge even on the parish level a lot of the leadership or lack thereof when it comes to certain things like you mentioned reverence. Okay, sorry, I don't wear flip-flops and shorts anymore. And my wife has a skirt that goes and covers her knees and she covers her shoulders. And we're in the no we go to the Novus Order. She wears a veil. Now it happens to be a Novus Ordo parish that's very reverent. We sing Latin hymns. No, none of the one that you just described. I got the whole world in my
No,
hands type
no,
of,
no, no.
no.
It was the Barney song, "If you're happy and you know it."
Oh yeah, if you're happy, you know it. So the thing is, you know, we sing the Sanctus, we sing the
Mm,
Gloria, and it's a beautiful thing. So it is a very reverent. But the pastor, you know, God bless him, he's trying to tell people about being more reverent, dressing more reverent. I got to keep my head down. I'll be honest with you. It's such a big parish that communion takes about 25 minutes because there's an altar rail and the priest and the deacon
good.
with the altar boy, and they have the paten. Is it the paten?
Yeah, yeah.
The plate. So it takes about 25 minutes. I got to keep my head down. I
Oh,
cannot
yeah.
look at the people
Oh,
going.
yeah.
I'm a man and I have to keep my head down. And I want to shake some people sometimes. So look, I'm not judging you, but you're in church.
I know. I did
Talk
that
about that if you
one
don't
night.
mind, Karen. The need for how about the need for
Yes,
modesty?
yes. when my son was 17. He's now 23. But, it was the middle of, we were homeschooling him, and we were really trying to make sure he grew up to be a good Catholic, which he did, but it took work. But we went to Mass one night because we went to the youth Mass because he had youth ministry right after it. And this woman comes in and sits in front of us. And I don't know if she had on, like, not church clothes, but her daughter had on short shorts with like juicy written on the butt. And she's sitting right in front of my son.
Right.
And I thought, here I am trying to make him be, respect women and be a decent Catholic boy. I wanted to punch the mother. It's like, this is what you plop down in front of my 17-year-old son.
Right.
So, but I mean,
And that's one of the things is like your article is Radical Catholicism that you wrote in the Catholic Exchange. If you're just joining us here, Aaron Hall is joining us, and we're discussing that article. Radical Catholicism just means, can we just get back to
being
our
Catholic again.
ABCs?
Yeah.
Talk about that. Talk
But
about
we're
that.
so, when I started going to the Incarnation, the Anglican Ordinariate, um, I realized how upside down my thinking had been. Because, as soon as we started, and we had an altar rail. Somebody burned our church down because our priest told the truth all the time, but thank God we're finally rebuilding. Um, but it changed me without me consciously changing. So we had an altar rail, and after, I'd say, a few weeks of kneeling for communion, I realized I should have been kneeling for communion, and felt very convicted then if I would go to a Novus Ordo mass and have to, go up there and well, I don't stick my hand out, but, march in line while well, Betty from row 3 is passing Jesus out like Skittles. And, and so I just realized how much my world had been upside down. It's like when you're
Right.
not being reverent, you just don't realize how huge it all is, how huge God is. It's like, and so one of the things I said in my article was, kneel down and stick out your tongue. Um, because you're receiving the creator of the universe. And when I first started, I was a convert. When I first started going with my husband to Catholic Church, that was back when no one touched the host except the priest, because the priest's hands had been consecrated for that. And that really hit me hard because I said, these people really believe what they say they believe. And then when my husband and I broke up for a while, and I went off and didn't go to Catholic church. When I came back, all of a sudden, Betty from row 3 is passing Jesus out like a skittle. And I'm like, what happened? Her hands are not consecrated. And y'all gave me the big speech about the priest's hands being consecrated.
Mm.
Um, and I wrote about that in my book. The last time you guys had me here, I was talking about my book, which is called The Sound of Silence. And it's a story of my friend, Father Mankowski, who was responsible for me, starting to see the world right side up. But I wrote about the fact that I have some great quotes from him um, on communion in the hand and what's wrong with it, um, and so people can read about that there. But I just went, this can't be right. And you were right. There are Novus Ordo churches who are very reverent. And when we lived in the mountains of North Carolina, we had one, and I had no problem. It was real mass with incense, and they didn't have altar rails, but they weren't making you sing if you're happy and you know it. Um, and so when we moved back down here, I lived in LA for 35 years, and then I've lived down here for about a decade. And in either city, you cannot find a reverent mass. They just don't exist. And, the church that I went to for daily mass is the most conservative Novus Ordo mass in Orlando. And the first thing that drove me crazy is, when they ring the bell and the priest is coming down the aisle and everybody's supposed to be, getting ready and in the right frame of mind for mass, all the people in the congregation are turning around waving at each other and talking, and this one woman in front of me gives the tricky dicky peace sign with both hands, and when I took my husband there the first time, that would just shock the life out of him. He's like, "What the heck is going on?"
Karen Hall, let me tell you something. If you're just joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe, Karen is with us. She has a new article in Catholic Exchange, Radical Catholicism. Please go and read it. I'm going to throw it over to Joe, Karen, but I would say this: I I have come to dread the sign of peace.
Oh,
I the like you said, the tricky dicky peace signs and things like
yes,
that. I have come to dread. I used to, when I met my wife, I used to at the sign of peace just shut my eyes and put my head down.
yes, yes,
I would do the sign of the peace to my wife because you know what, especially after COVID, especially
yeah.
at
It's
people,
been
you don't know who
insane
wants to
after
shake hands.
COVID.
You don't
Yes,
know who wants to not
yes.
shake hands. You know what I'd rather do? Now I just kind of look nicely and I just go, peace be with you. That's it. And then
Yeah.
I look back. But let's keep it moving. Joe
That's one of
Resinello.
my favorite things about the Anglican Ordinariate is we don't have the sign of peace. So it's like I wish
I think it's
everybody
become a
could.
distraction, to be honest with you. I think it's become a
It's a
distraction.
cocktail party in the middle of mass, and it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It's like peace be with you. Are the Jets going to cover today? Like
Yeah,
that's what you
really.
say to your buddy. Joe Resinello, where do you want to go?
Well, ultimately, I think the factor that kind of changes people's perspective on the mass is the true presence. And sadly, we all know the statistic: 30% of American Catholics only believe in the true presence. The bishops have a response to this now. They're having a Eucharistic Congress. They're trying to basically revive that. Ultimately,
Having caused it in the first place.
no, I hear you. I mean, ultimately, I think what happened was, and I actually think, as we talked to a lot of people, this happened way before Vatican II. There were voices
Oh yeah.
within the church way before Vatican II. There were dissenting voices within the church, and then it came to a head. Vatican II took place, and then people took liberties. I mean,
Hmm.
if you look at the documents of Vatican II,
Yes.
they're accurate. And
Yes.
if people followed them as they are written, for instance, believe it or not, Vatican II says that the Mass should be said facing the tabernacle.
Uh-huh.
The document of Vatican II says that. You don't see that.
No,
I
there's
can go on.
nothing wrong with the documents. What's wrong is what has happened in the spirit of Vatican
No
II.
question. But you know what it is? It's a reflection of the people. I mean, I think the
Mhm.
people, I can't speak for other countries. I can only speak for America. The people have gone from God, and the church is meeting the people where they are. It's the
Yes.
same thing with our politics. We
Yes.
get the leaders we deserve. You know what I'm saying? Like, we get the leaders we deserve because the people have gone away from God. The difference is the church is supposed to raise people up as opposed to stepping down to them. And
Well,
it,
I think the church
please,
is also supposed to catechize them, and we got here
another
because
very, you're so right. I talk about this constantly with my wife. People don't know what the church teaches.
they don't begin to know.
They don't even know, to be honest with you, because we were talking about this, they don't even know what marriage is. The
Yeah.
church does not, frankly, articulate what marriage is. People don't have an understanding of what a
Yeah.
Catholic marriage is. That's another conversation for another day. So here we are. What am I trying to get at? And I'm interested in your comments. Vatican II took place. It allows for people like us to do what we do. Because before Vatican II, we could not do this.
Yeah.
And there's been many great lay apostolates. And the church is still the church because the hand of God is on it. However, and this is what I want you to comment on, it's a dinosaur. And for the wheel to turn, it's going to take, I think, time. I think we're starting to see young priests who are
Yeah.
better. I
Yeah.
see them. I
I
see
do
them
too.
young.
I
And
even see young Jesuits that are better.
without a doubt. So and I'll tell you what, a lot of these older, and I'm not going to name names, 75, they're gone. So I actually think we're beginning to see the springtime that John Paul talked about. We're going to, and if we all live to a ripe old age, we're going to see it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, I've always thought that when my generation dies off, the church will be in much better shape. And, that's because we grew up in the 60s, and we watched everything get thrown out the window. And our priest gave a great homily yesterday on order and how, God loves order instead of chaos. And because we threw everything out the window, we threw ourselves into chaos, and that's where we are now. And so I really hope that that will happen. I hope I'll live long enough to see it. But all I'm hearing is that the younger priests are more conservative and, more what I think of as Catholic. And I've gotten a lot of letters from young Jesuits because they read my book. And so, there are even conservative Jesuits coming along. Um, so, I'm praying because I just keep thinking, I've been thinking for years that at some point the pendulum has got to swing the other way, because I
It
think
will.
it has swung as far as it can swing in the direction that it's been swinging.
Well, the thing is, too, Karen Hall, I'd love your comments on this. The way I see it is anybody who denies that there's been an infiltration of the church is, I think, is just you're not paying attention to history. Okay.
Yes,
Now, who infiltrated the church? Some people say the Masons, some people say the communists. I just look at it this way: those who are against the church have at some point in the 19th century began to infiltrate the church. I usually point to,
mhm,
let's say, the Marxists. They were the most vocal. You did look at people like Bella Dodd, said, she personally sent 1,200 or 1,000 seminarians,
yes,
communists into the seminaries. Okay. Um, about the generation dying off, you have two parts of that generation. One part of that generation that needs to go to their judgment, and may God have mercy on their soul, are those who infiltrated. The other part are those who allowed themselves to listen to
yes,
the snake that
yes.
came into the church
Well,
because
I
it
was going to say,
sounded good. They
you
didn't
know,
come in pounding the table on Karl Marx. They came in saying things that sounded good.
yes,
Shouldn't we care about the poor?
yes.
It's those people that if they're part of that generation, they're older. It just happens. That's human life. They're going to die. And the younger generation is not allowing those Marxist voices to really have a say like they used to, let's say, when we were kids. Your thoughts, Karen?
Well, I can tell you that my son is 23 now, and all of his friends, first of all of his friends are Catholic, and they're all, my kind of Catholic. They're all very conservative. I remember he told me when he was in high school, and the youth ministry at our Nouveau Ordo church was really good because we had a great priest. And the priest asked them if they wanted him to say mass facing them or facing Ad Orientem, and they all unanimously voted for Ad Orientem. And my son, I was worried about him because when he was in high school, we had the whole house set up so that, we had the pool table and the pool and everything downstairs, and the kids could have it, and we would just hide in our bedroom. And so I noticed that my son seemed to be going to confession every 5 minutes. And I told my husband, what are they doing down there at night that he needs to go to confession? So I asked him about it, and he said he and his friend Lewis, who's now his roommate, um, had made a pact to go to confession every 2 weeks. So these like
God bless them.
17-year-old kids, and that was when he was 17. He's now 23, and they've been doing it ever since.
No,
So
it's a beautiful. I'm so happy that you're bringing up the young people. In fact, just to personalize it for a second in a similar way. So our foster son, thank God, and thanks everybody for their prayers. He's going to become our adopted son over the next month.
oh
Okay.
yeah,
He's
congratulations.
15 and a half years old. We don't know if he's baptized as a Christian, so we're going to do a conditional baptism, and he's going to get his sacraments. Okay. I'm standing next to him. I don't know why I didn't notice it before. I'm standing next to him in mass. He knows the Gloria in Latin. In other words, like he sings the Gloria in Latin. He knows the Pater Noster. He knows the Ave Maria. He is so in love with Jesus. Okay, he can't wait to go to confession. That's why I'm even bringing it up. He can't
Uh-huh.
wait to be able to go to the sacrament of reconciliation and then to receive Jesus. He knows This is one of the problems that you're writing about in your article, Radical Catholicism. He understands that's Jesus in the Eucharist. He knows it.
Yes.
And then that's kind of a couple of minutes before that we go to the break, Karen. that's the crux of the matter, is that we need to get back to understanding that's Jesus. Your son knows it. My son knows it.
Yes.
Joe's kids know it. Okay. We need to get back to that.
Yes.
And it's our responsibility because the formation belongs to us. We have to form them. Talk about that if you don't mind, Karen.
We do. And I mean, we were very careful to make sure he was well catechized too. But, yeah, we have to do it because I think the reason that such a huge percentage of Catholics don't believe in the real presence is that nobody has acted like it's the truth for many years. So, I don't understand why at a Novus Ordo parish where people are off the rails that the priest can't get up there and say, let's talk about what you're going to wear to mass. And let's talk about how you're going to act. Let's talk about when you send, I listed this in my article, when you get there, get on your kneeler and pray. Don't sit and talk to the woman next to you about which parking lot you had trouble finding a place in. And so, I think priests could do a lot that they're not doing. Certainly the priest where I was going to daily mass could have told everybody when the bell rings and the priest process down the aisle, that's not the time to have a cocktail party and wave peace signs. So I think that a lot of this has happened because it was allowed to happen. And you can talk about who's the most to blame, but when we all became uncatechized, the priests theoretically were catechized. So, why did you not do anything about this?
Right. Right. We're going to take a quick break. Karen Hall is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. I will tell you this. In my experience, obviously, I'm 57 years old. And I remember, and again, growing up, I didn't go to Latin Mass because growing up was the 1970s. The new Mass, the
Right,
Novus
folk
Ordo
mass, guitar mass.
had already come in. But even so, in the time I spent in Mass and in the church up until I decided that it was going to be dumb, and a knucklehead and not practice it sometime in my teens, there's a distinct difference between that
Yes.
15 years, and that was Novus Ordo. You respected the priest. Like if you walked into St. Francis Xavier Church and you saw Monsignor Piazza, you respected him, or Monsignor Dooley or Father Scanlon, or any of these, what they would call now old school priests. Okay. Maybe our fathers didn't like them too much. My father was a hooligan. That's why, my father didn't like priests too much. I pray for my father. He passed away a while ago. But my point is, but you respected the priest. You didn't get away with this nonsense like they get away with now. That's one of the things that's lost, is that I understand these priests are under a lot of pressure because a lot of times the people in the pew, there's a lot of reasons for this, people in the pew. But let's take a quick break. We'll talk about that when we come back here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Karen Hall's with us. Please go and read the article for yourself, Radical Catholicism, that's available at Catholic Exchange. We'll be right back on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello. We're way in the breach with Karen Hall. We're discussing her new article in Catholic Exchange. Please go and read it. Radical Catholicism. Joe Rossinello.
Ultimately, a lot of, and I do it too. We throw around titles, progressive Catholic, Orthodox Catholic. There's really just Catholic. It's written down. That's the beauty of the Catholic Church. Everything is written down. You either do it or you don't. It's really that simple. Whether you're a bishop or whether you're an old man, the last person who walks in the church, it's all written down. You know what you're supposed to do. You either do it or you don't. Sadly, we're human. There's a human element to everything in life, constantly. I read something this morning doing my spiritual reading about Saint Callistus. He was a former slave, and during his reign in the 3rd century, it was the first anti-pope. The first anti-pope who, after he was martyred, the Pope repented, and then that person was martyred. My whole point is there's always been problems. There's always been issues because we're human. We're just human. And I've had issues too. I left my church that I grew up in, and I go to a Polish American church. I find that the Polish are a little bit more in line with things. Not saying that I just, I don't want to hear the Barney song either, in fairness. With that said, though, there's only so much we can do. And I brought this up on other shows because I used to get nuts. I'm going to be honest with you, Karen. I don't anymore. And why I don't get nuts is because I fast every Wednesday for the church rigorously. And so does my wife. And I've been doing that for a long time, actually, now. And it's helped my spiritual life, but it also has brought me great amounts of peace. And someone gave me a great piece of advice too. And I brought this up on other shows, but I'll bring it up to you. And then I'm interested in your comment. When you see something that gets crazy, and it does, pray to Our Lady of Sorrows, because no one is more appalled by anything that is harmful to the body of Christ than the Mother of God, who stood at the foot of the cross. No one, because she was perfect, no one is more appalled than her. So we pray to her and she can help us. Your thoughts on those two things? Because again, I used to go berserk on social media. I swear, I used to go berserk. I don't anymore. I have channeled that into my fast on Wednesday. And I personally believe, because God said so, Jesus said, fasting and prayer is the answer, that's what we can do. And I do believe that that's efficacious. We may never see it, but God will take that and he will use it. What do you think?
That's one of the things I mentioned in my article on Radical Catholicism, is that because I was listing some things you can do, and one of the things I listed was fasting, because you know, everything that you just said. And Father Mankowski, who I wrote the book about, when he died, I don't know how long, he'd been doing it for a couple of years. He and some friends were fasting 3 weeks out of the month, and all they ate was bread and water. And then the other week they'd have normal food and then go back to fasting, because he said, kind of with a wink in his eye, some demons are only driven out by prayer and fasting. He started doing it when, you know, things in the hierarchy became as bad as they currently are. And so that was something I recommended. I think it's very powerful. I think people don't realize, the power that they have. It's very powerful to kneel for communion. It changes your life. And the same with fasting. And plus, I always have, like, in my head, this imaginary treasure chest of, what I give God in a day. So you can throw fasting into that. And I started doing that because I felt like the St. Michael prayer was just so inadequate to me, to what's going on in the world. What's my one little prayer going to do? So I just started thinking about, I have a chest that I can fill up every day, and I can put the St. Michael prayer in it. I can put fasting into it. I can put the rosary into it, anything I offer up. And it's like God can only work with what we give him. And so, I got to be focused on what can I give him every day, and not think, oh, this is so inadequate to everything that's bad in the world. So I absolutely agree. And one of the things I said in my article was, um, when when everyone declared that Catholics don't have to give up meat on Fridays anymore, that's not what was declared. What was declared was that, or take up some other penance in place of it. And I think most people only heard the first part. I know I did for a long time. And then I realized I'm not taking up some other penance because I forget. And so I stopped eating meat on Fridays, because that's something I can remember easily, and it's what I can do. But I just think there's so much power in these things that we can do that people don't realize.
You're 100%. And I just want to piggyback on that, because you said something I think that's very important. God could only work with what we do give him. Now, someone could hear that, a Protestant can hear that, and they say, you're earning your salvation. No, wrong. God works in our attempt to carry our cross, which involves sacrifice. So you create a space of sacrifice. A priest forgoes getting married. That is a huge sacrifice. So God enters that. When we pick up our cross as married people, we have certain responsibilities and things we have to do. God enters that sacrifice and we become empty. And then the Holy Spirit fills us. How does that happen? Daily prayer, weekly fasting, monthly confession, adoration, receiving the Eucharist in a state of grace. But first, we have to empty ourselves. You see, that's the formula. God doesn't magically work in people's lives. We have to, like you said, give him something. And what we give him is that space of sacrifice, the cross. We all have a cross. Single people have it, priests have it, married people have it. It's the cross of living out the faith. And that means many times that we're taking a back seat to the world. I mean, here you are. You wrote for some of the biggest sitcoms ever. I'm sure you saw people jump to the front of the line who didn't follow the line of Jesus Christ. I mean, I don't know you that well, but I can bet anything that took place. That goes for all of us. And are we willing to do that? Because when we do, we're acknowledging to God that you come first. And I believe everything you say. Therefore, I'm giving something up. And then God jumps into that space. And then we got to fill up and we do those other things. That's the secret. That's how we do it. What do you think?
I think that, to me, the other side of that, or part of it, is that we're giving up free will, because that's the only thing, our free will is the only thing God doesn't already own. And so if I use my free will to say a rosary instead of, to watch a TV show for half an hour, then that's what I can throw in the chest and say, I sacrificed this part of my free will. And it also helped me because I was always feeling like I could never do enough no matter how much I did. And so I felt like, well, if I have this concrete image, which is very Ignatian, I think he'd be very happy with this concept. And I can not think that, I'm failing if I'm not on my knees 24 hours a day, praying for everything. It's like you can't do it and live up to the responsibilities you have in life. So that image gave me a chance to not feel defeated, because I felt like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. So I think all of that is in the mix. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we've lost so much from losing knowing how much a sacrifice was worth. And so, and we've lost knowing what suffering was worth, because we decided at some point that we know everything. And so we have to have euthanasia because that's not a good quality of life. Well, you don't know what God is doing with that person. God has to know when it's the right time for them to die, because, a lot of people become very holy in suffering, and that might be what it's there for, and they might need it. So, just all the ways we've made it easy on ourselves have really come to haunt us.
Yeah, Karen Hall's joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. My attitude is this: if you want Christianity on your own terms, the Catholic Church is not for you.
Yes.
And I don't say that lightly, because I don't want to see anybody leave the church. But if you're in the church and you don't like something, nobody cares. Nobody cares what you think. See, we say we don't like something because we don't like the fact that it's been changed because somebody else said they didn't like it.
Yes.
Like I've had this experience in RCIA. That's why I stopped doing RCIA. In other words, with the other people there, just not knowing what the heck they're talking about, and also being very selfish. Oh, I don't want communion. I don't want communion on the tongue, like I'm a child. I want it in my hand. Okay, it was never that way. And it's nobody's treating you like a child. And it's like you mentioned, Karen, the priest's hands are consecrated, yours are not. Anyway, I could go off on that for a while, but I do want to get to a particular topic. You know that you're on the right track because you could measure the effect coming from our enemies. Where am I going with this?
Mhm.
Okay. Under the current administration, you had radical traditionalist Catholic ideology talked about in a memo from the FBI. Okay. Basically saying that Catholics who have this radical traditionalist Catholic ideology, what the three of us would just call Catholic, okay, we don't need all the extra words, all right, we're just Catholic, that the government should monitor you. And of course, they were cold busted. I will thank people like Senator Cruz, Senator Hawley, Senator Lee, who brought and really put the screws. There's not a lot they could do, but at least they made it public and they put the screws to Merrick Garland and said,
Yeah.
basically, how dare you? How dare you? And he denied it, of course, which he's just a liar. That's what he is. That's not a political statement. That's just a statement of fact. Merrick Garland is an extremist, Marxist revolutionary. I don't care what anybody says. And he lies through his teeth. But what are your thoughts on that? Because I guess if you're just Catholic, well, does that mean if you believe in the real presidents, like how does this spill over that the FBI's got to monitor us? Like somehow, like I don't know what their agenda is. I'll throw it over to you, Karen, because I think you know where I'm going.
Well, I think that, you know, the reason they're going after traditional Catholics is that we're like the only people left they can't do anything with. You know, we're the only people left who are still opposed to the culture like it is, and are still fighting it. But I went to you know, October fair at our church the other night, and I took video of kids throwing a football around. I wanted to put it online and say domestic terrorists at play, but I was afraid I'd lose my Facebook account. But I really think, you know, I used to think when I first was Catholic and I hated the way the culture was going, and I thought, well, at least I'm Catholic and I can always say, you know, when people want to know why I'm not, you know, throwing everything out the window, I can say I'm Catholic, we don't believe that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sorry, but I mean, we've been sold down the river for decades, but the current Pope has really sold us down the river because, you know, the things that are the third rail subjects, we don't have anywhere to stand. Except now I can say I'm a traditional Catholic. So when the Pope comes out and says it's an act of love to take a vaccine that has aborted fetuses in it, I can't say I couldn't get a letter saying I don't have to take the vaccine because, you know, our church is against it, because he threw a party for it. And you know, he threw a Pfizer party and stuff like, you know, the non-traditional families, and you know, everything that is outside of the order that God created, and that's all third rail subjects. And I can no longer say, you know, my church doesn't believe in that because the Pope's blessing gay marriages. So we're unless you're a traditionalist, you don't have any rock to stand on because they've turned it all into quicksand.
You
So
know what? You know what? I'm going to hand it over to Joe, Karen. And if you're just joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello, we're weighing the breach with Karen Hall. Please go out and read her article, CatholicExchange.com, CatholicExchange.com. The article is Radical Catholicism. I mentioned earlier, Karen, that I get down, I get in my own head sometimes. What gets me more down than anything else as a Catholic, as people who are very respectful, by the way, to the hierarchy. We're critical. Joe has been critical. I've been critical. You're just critical. We're critical when needs be. Okay. But the thing that gets me down more than anything is what you just talked about, because I say to myself, if the world is getting in my face, I have the church.
yes,
If the world wants to stomp my face, stomp a boot on top of my face, I have the church. Okay. And of course, we have the church. That's why we're here talking about it. But the leadership of the church, many, not all, many, I can't rely on them. And I'll give you seconds, quick 30-second story. I was going to go and get in the Archdiocese of New York. I worked right down the street. When I lived in New Jersey, I'm in Arizona now. I worked right down the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral. I was going to walk down. I was going to go get an exemption letter at the parish office. And that very day I was going to go down there, the Archdiocese came out with a letter that says, no priest in the Archdiocese will give an exemption letter for the vaccine.
yes,
Now I've gotten
yes.
2 vaccines, and it's one of the things that frustrates me more. I was supposed to be able to rely on you
Yes, yes,
and you abandoned me.
yes, absolutely threw us
Again,
under the
not the
bus.
church, but the men who, in that particular
Yes,
case, we all know who runs the Archdiocese of New York. Okay. And in that case, I was abandoned by him.
yes.
Okay. And many of us were during that time. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But we have a few minutes. I want to hand it over to Joe, Karen, and we'll keep it moving.
Well, what I want to talk about is, obviously we're talking about radical Catholicism, which basically just means we follow what the church says. That's it.
Exactly.
Whether you're a
Exactly.
bishop, whether you're a priest, whether you're a nun, and you're doing it or you're not. I mean, it comes down to it. We all fall short, but we keep trying. I want to talk about what keeps people from doing that. And I think what keeps people from doing that is we don't pray enough. We don't fast enough, because the forces of the world are overwhelming for
Hmm.
everybody. And if we try to do what Jesus asked of us on our own strength, no matter what state in life you're in, you're going to fail. However, if you do within your state of life, you mentioned you can't be on your knees praying. We're not monks. We have
Right.
responsibilities. But within our station of life, if we do what we're called to do and we don't rely on our own strength, and we pray and we fast and we live a sacramental life, um, we share from our resources, we do everything the church asks of us to do to the best of our ability, God will give you the strength to do it. And I think that's the answer, whether you're a bishop or whether you're just a regular person. We're not doing what we're asked to do because it's supernatural. It's how does a single person remain chaste? That's a supernatural ask. You're never going
Yes,
to
it
be
is.
able to do that if you're not praying and fasting and living a sacramental life. How do we meet our responsibilities as husband and wives? How does a priest serve his people? It comes down to relying on the tools, and that's what we're not doing. Because I can assure you, if we were, we would be doing it. And that's where I think what we have to communicate to people is, as St. Paul said, when I am weak, therefore I am strong. He's basically saying what I just said. He just says it better because he's St. Paul and I'm not. But like, but we have to rely on the tools. Talk
Yes.
about that, because I think that's the answer. And I think if we do that, everything will fall into place.
Yeah, it just completely changed my life when I started going to the Anglican ordinary parish and realizing just how upside down everything was. And so, things that you do out of faith, it's like, I'm going to kneel a lot. I'm going to have communion kneeling. I'm going to pray a lot more. I'm going to be a lot more reverent. And it's like all those things that absolutely changed my life. And the main way it changed my life was just putting everything right side up because, God had been the thing I do in my spare time, and he's supposed to be the thing I do first. And changing that changes everything.
So you know what
Um,
it is, Karen? I think that's a fruit of you understanding that that's the Eucharist, and that's a fruit of your
yes,
prayer, and that's a fruit of those things. It goes hand in hand. Like, and I think what happens is sometimes not this conversation. We put the cart before the horse. Someone is not going to say, "We'll use the reception of the Eucharist properly." Um, unless they know that that's Jesus.
true.
Because it just becomes whatever. It's just rote. But when you know that, everything changes. And that's what we have to foster. I think we as a church have to play chess as opposed to checkers. We have to basically lay the board out where our people kind of funnel in the proper way. And I don't know if we're doing that. Singing the Barney song isn't doing that, but having a perpetual adoration chapel is doing that.
Yes,
Having confession before every mass is doing that. You see, it's playing chess as opposed to checkers.
Yes.
We have to start thinking like that as a
Yeah.
church. And I think if we do that, slowly but surely, the people will understand that Jesus is on the altar. And then when you understand that, everything else falls into place.
Karen, I'm going to throw that over to you. I want you to tie that in also, if you don't mind, because I wanted to ask you about this. And like I said, I'll tie it in with what Joe just mentioned. You get a lot of high-profile conversions or reversions.
Mhm.
I pray in gratitude because, listen, people wake up when they see a Rob Schneider or a Shia LaBeouf, and they're not messing around with squishy Catholicism.
Exactly.
Rob Schneider he just was down at the TLM here in Phoenix with Father Passo. Okay. That's a parish that we're familiar with. Father Passo's been over our home for dinner. Father Passo's TLM, for FSSP. And because that they do the Latin Mass. So tie what Joe said into these people that are coming, and this is a hopeful thing. That's where I want your
It
comment,
is a hopeful
because
thing.
it's hopeful because they're not Shia LaBeouf told Bishop Barron, I'm not interested in being sold anything.
Right.
And the TLM to me was something that I didn't feel like I was being told. You know where I'm going, Karen. I'm throwing it over to you.
Yes. And I was thinking about the fact that I've been working on another book that I was inspired to write while going to the New Order Church during Lent. And it's called Love Songs for Betty. And I'm dedicating it to Betty from row 3, who's doing the Tricky Dicky peace signs, to talk about how it has so completely changed my life in such huge ways to start doing it right. And the good thing about all these well-known converts to the traditional mass is that we have so many bad Catholics in our face every day. So, maybe that will offset Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and, the list, to see these people. I'm hoping that it will make a big impression and will at least make people want to know what's going on there and start
Yeah.
asking questions.
Yeah. I mean, and God bless Archbishop Cordileone, because when he wrote that letter and came out and said that Nancy Pelosi is not to receive the Eucharist, he was being very, very pastoral. He really was. He tried to explain, I didn't come to this decision just today.
Right.
Okay. It's over the course of time, and trying to be merciful and trying to extend a hand. And she basically blew him off.
Oh, the
That's
very
what she
next thing
did.
happened was she flew to Rome and went to communion at a papal mass.
And that's where if you're listening to this on the radio, you can't see this, but if you're watching this, that's when I slap my forehead.
Yes,
and
yes.
and because then I just have to shut up because I'm going to get angry. But Joe, we have 2 minutes left with Karen, 2 or 3 minutes left with Karen.
I think we have to focus on basically first principles. I think
Yes.
we have to lead by example and show people the way. I think the church is going in a good direction. I do think it's going to take time, sadly. And also, I do think too, and I'm interested in, this is where I'm going with the question. We're all flawed. All of us are flawed. I think about this a lot because one of my biggest sins, my wife tells me this. I talk down to people. I do. I do. Karen, I do. I do. So my point is, um, God says love is patient, love is kind, and we have to endure each other in life. Talk about that a little bit, because ultimately none of us have it down perfectly. And I think at the same time, those who maybe are running a little further along have to show a good example, which we're all trying to do.
Well, it's a delicate balance, and one of the things that Father Mankowski said to me, and he talked about how he lived his life really radically, and that part of the reason he did was, he says, I think people lack the imagination uh, for holiness. It's like they don't know what it looks like, so you got to show them. And so I think that's a lot of what we have to do. And the problem is, yes, everybody's flawed, but everybody isn't right. Um, so like what the church teaches is right and going against it is wrong. So we have to get that, because the thing is, you're right that it all moves slowly and we have to be patient, and the church moves like a dinosaur, and et cetera, et cetera. But while that's going on, there are souls at stake. And we have to be really aware of that. So that we can do anything that we can do. So that's what I think about that.
Well, we're so happy that you came on the show. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, Karen Hall, joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. So please go out and read the entire article. Okay. Joe and I, we love going off on tangents. So the article is going to have a lot more for information for you. Radical Catholicism is the article that Karen has written, and you could see that. You could read that at CatholicExchange.com. So we would encourage you to do so. Karen, are you on social media at all?
I'm on Facebook. I weed out anybody who's going to yell at me. So if you want to come and converse, that's fine. I'm going to get rid of you if you yell. So I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on X. So you can find me all those places.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to go and actually follow Karen on X. I'm a big fan
and
of
I love
X.
having civil conversations. So we don't do that much anymore, but I like
That's
that.
right. We don't. We lost that. So when you come back the next time, we'll talk about the need for civility in America, because
Well,
there
I was
does
going to
seem
say, I'm going to
out
write
there.
more articles for the Catholic Exchange, and so I'll let you know when I do, so I can come back and we'll talk them.
Perfect.
And we're going to look forward to it. Karen Hall, God bless you, sister. Thanks for being here as always.
All right, thank you guys.
You're welcome. And thank you out there for joining us at the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Download the app, share it with your friends. You'll have access to all of our station's content. And speaking of social media, you can find Joe and I on Rumble, X. Rumble and X is really where we love for you to follow us. We are also, of course, on YouTube and Facebook, but YouTube's being a real pain, so we're not relying on that too much. But wherever you see us, help us out a little bit. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.